The first lie doesn't scream, it whispers. It sounds like reason clearing its throat. I have time. That thought lands softly, like a blanket over unease. It slows your pulse, it quiets your instincts. It convinces you that nothing urgent is happening yet, and that softness is exactly why it's lethal. Collapse doesn't kick down doors. It waits for you to sit down and get comfortable. The danger begins when delay starts to feel responsible. When hesitation disguises itself as patience. You tell yourself you're being level-headed, not panicked. That you're waiting for more information. That acting now would be dramatic. But collapse doesn't punish drama. It punishes hesitation. By the time danger looks obvious, it's already layered itself around you. The lie survives because it mimics wisdom. It borrows the language of caution and maturity. Let's not overreact. Let's see how this plays out. These phrases sound intelligent in stable systems. They're rewarded in offices and meetings. But collapse rewrites the rules. Here, delay isn't restraint, it's erosion. Time begins to behave differently. Days don't move forward cleanly, they smear. 1 week feels like nothing changed, and then suddenly, everything has. Services degrade and fragments. Communication stutters. Trust thins. Nothing breaks all at once, so the mind refuses to acknowledge the pattern forming beneath the surface. This is where people get trapped, not by chaos, but by continuity. The lights still turn on, so it must be fine. The store's still open, so it must be temporary. The roads still work, so tomorrow must be normal. But collapse rarely removes everything at once. It removes options quietly, one at a time, until choice becomes illusion. Waiting feels safe because it avoids responsibility. As long as you wait, you're not wrong, you're just patient. Acting means accepting consequences. Waiting means you can blame circumstances later. That emotional relief is seductive. It's also deadly. The mind wants permission before it moves. It wants confirmation from authority, consensus from others, proof that action is justified. But collapse doesn't issue memos. It doesn't announce thresholds. It just shifts conditions until movement costs more than inaction ever did. The most dangerous part is that this lie doesn't feel like fear. It feels like calm. It feels adult. It feels reasonable. But calm in the wrong moment is just denial wearing good manners. By the time urgency feels socially acceptable, your best exits have already narrowed. The clean choices are gone. What's left are compromises dressed as decisions. Collapse doesn't roar. It whispers. And the ones who survive are the ones who hear the whisper and move before it has to scream. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see where the survivors are watching from. And hit subscribe while you're here. Normality is seductive because it feels earned. You wake up, perform familiar motions, and your brain rewards you with calm. Coffee tastes the same. The screen lights up. The clock still moves forward. These small confirmations whisper that nothing is truly wrong. In collapse, that whisper is dangerous. It convinces you that continuity equals safety, even when the foundation beneath that routine is already cracking. Routine works because it reduces cognitive load. You don't have to think, you just follow yesterday's pattern. The brain loves this efficiency. It interprets repetition as proof of stability. But collapse doesn't shatter routines all at once. It erodes them quietly. The structure still stands while the supports rot. And by the time the decay is obvious, the habit of staying has already hardened. People often mistake functionality for health. Power still works, so the system must be fine. Stores still open, so supply chains must be stable. Phones still connect, so coordination must exist. These are illusions created by momentum. Systems can appear intact long after they've lost resilience. What you're seeing isn't strength, it's inertia. Routine also narrows perception. When you do the same thing every day, your brain filters out anomalies. Long lines become busy hours. Empty shelves become delivery delays. Tension in people's faces becomes stress. You stop asking why and start accepting that. Awareness dulls not because you're ignorant, but because your mind is conserving energy. The danger isn't that routines exist. It's that they begin to replace judgment. You stop asking whether something makes sense and start asking whether it's familiar. The question shifts from, is this safe, to, is this normal? And that shift quietly dismantles your ability to adapt. Routines also create psychological anchors. Leaving them feels like loss. Even when logic says move, emotion resists. You've invested identity into repetition, your schedule, your habits, your version of self. Walking away feels like erasing that identity. So you stay, not because it's right, but because it's familiar. This is how collapse traps people without force. It offers comfort as a cage. It lets you decorate the bars, it lets you sleep well enough to ignore the narrowing exits. And when the structure finally fails, the fall feels sudden, even though it's been happening all along. Those who survive learn to interrogate comfort. They ask what it costs, not what it provides. They treat ease with suspicion and routine as a signal to reevaluate. When life becomes too predictable during unstable times, that predictability is often the warning. Collapse doesn't announce itself with chaos. It whispers through habit. It hides inside the ordinary. And the longer you mistake comfort for safety, the harder it becomes to recognize the moment when staying stops being stability and starts being surrender. Normal behavior feels safe because it blends in. It keeps friction low. It lets you move through the world without drawing attention. In stable systems, that's an advantage. In collapse, it becomes a trap. The moment conditions start shifting, normal stops being neutral and starts becoming dangerous. At first, normality feels like protection. You do what everyone else does. You follow routines. You match the pace of the crowd. This gives the illusion of safety through belonging. If everyone is doing it, it must be fine. But collapse doesn't care about consensus. It exploits it. When behavior becomes predictable, it becomes manageable. And anything manageable can be controlled. Normal behavior creates patterns. Patterns create visibility. And visibility attracts pressure. When people line up, someone controls the line. When people wait, someone decides how long. When people trust the system, someone decides when to break it. The more synchronized behavior becomes, the easier it is to manipulate. This is where danger shifts from physical to structural. The threat isn't an attacker. It's dependency. When people rely on shared routines, those routines become points of leverage. Supply lines, schedules, social norms, even politeness become tools that can be used to steer or contain large groups with minimal effort. Normalcy also numbs perception. When you do the same thing every day, your brain stops actively scanning. It fills in gaps automatically. You stop noticing when lines get longer, shelves get emptier, faces get tighter. You explain away anomalies because acknowledging them would require changing behavior, and change is expensive. This is how people miss the moment when adaptation becomes necessary. Not because they're unaware, but because awareness threatens identity. To admit that normal is breaking is to admit that the life you built around it might not survive. Most people choose denial over reinvention. Social gravity reinforces this. The moment you step outside routine, others question you. They ask why you're acting differently. They joke. They minimize. They accuse you of panic. Not because you're wrong, but because your deviation threatens their comfort. Your movement reflects their inaction. That pressure is powerful. Humans are wired to maintain group cohesion, even at personal cost. In collapse, that instinct becomes lethal. The group clings to normality as long as possible, and anyone who leaves early becomes irrational until they become unreachable. By the time the group agrees something is wrong, the advantage of movement is gone. Roads are crowded. Resources are contested. Every decision costs more and delivers less. The window that once allowed quiet repositioning slams shut. Survivors understand that normal is not a benchmark. It's a lagging indicator. It tells you what was, not what is. They don't wait for consensus to act. They move when patterns shift, not when alarms sound. Because in collapse, the most dangerous place to be is where everyone else still feels comfortable. There is a moment when understanding arrives all at once, and it feels nothing like relief. It feels like vertigo, like standing still while the ground tilts beneath you. Your body reacts before your thoughts can catch up. Your breath shortens. Your attention narrows. Something inside you says now. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with a certainty that makes stillness feel dangerous. This is the moment most people mislabel as panic. They tell themselves they're overthinking, that stress is distorting perception. They look for reassurance instead of information. They want the feeling to go away, not to be understood. But this sensation isn't chaos. It's alignment. It's multiple quiet signals finally snapping into a single direction. Clarity feels threatening because it removes excuses. When things are vague, you can wait. When they're clear, you're responsible. The mind resists that responsibility. It would rather doubt itself than accept that action is required. So people smother clarity with logic. They ask for more data, more confirmation, more time, and in doing so, they bury the very instinct designed to keep them alive. This is why clarity feels like fear. Fear is the body recognizing a mismatch between environment and behavior. It's an alert, not a command. But most people treat it as an error to be silenced rather than a message to be interpreted. They mistake discomfort for danger and danger for imagination. In reality, clarity under collapse is compression. Information that once arrived slowly now arrives all at once. Patterns that took months to form suddenly connect in minutes. Your nervous system adjusts before your rational mind does. That lag creates tension. But that tension is not panic. It's readiness. Those who survive learn to trust that feeling without dramatizing it. They don't announce it. They don't seek validation. They simply begin adjusting their posture toward the future. They simplify. They reduce exposure. They prepare exits quietly. They don't need certainty. They need alignment. Others wait for the feeling to pass. They tell themselves it's anxiety, that they're being irrational. They wait for reassurance from the same systems that created the unease. And while they wait, options evaporate. Doors close softly, routes narrow. The environment reshapes itself without them. Clarity never feels comfortable because it demands change before crisis makes it mandatory. It asks you to act while you still have choices. That's why so many people reject it. They'd rather be calm than correct. But survival favors those who listen when clarity whispers, not when chaos screams. The people who endure aren't braver or smarter. They're simply willing to move while movement still feels optional. By the time clarity feels safe, it's already too late to use it. Those who live long enough to understand this don't talk about the moment they panicked. They talk about the moment they stopped pretending everything was fine and quietly stepped away while they still could. Waiting feels responsible because it borrows the language of order. It sounds like patience, restraint, maturity. It feels adult. You were trained to believe that good people wait their turn, follow procedures, and trust systems to correct themselves. In stable times, that instinct is rewarded. In collapse, it becomes a liability disguised as virtue. Responsibility, as most people understand it, is obedience with a moral filter. You're taught that acting early is reckless, that moving without permission is selfish, that staying calm proves character. But collapse isn't a moral test, it's a mechanical one. Systems don't care how well you behaved while they failed. They only respond to pressure, timing, and motion. Waiting feels safe because it removes agency. If you wait, you don't have to choose. You're not accountable for the outcome. You were following guidance. That psychological relief is powerful. It protects the ego from blame. It lets you believe you're doing the right thing even as conditions worsen. Responsibility becomes a shield against guilt, not a tool for survival. This is why people cling to official narratives long after they stop matching reality. Authority offers emotional shelter. Even broken authority feels better than standing alone. It tells you what to do, or at least what not to do. It gives structure when uncertainty feels unbearable. But collapse erodes the value of centralized guidance long before it disappears entirely. As systems degrade, instructions lag behind reality. Advice becomes outdated the moment it's given. By the time permission arrives, the moment is past. Yet people wait anyway, because acting without permission feels transgressive. It feels like stepping out of line. And for many, social violation feels more dangerous than physical risk. This is how waiting becomes self-reinforcing. Each delay makes the next decision heavier. What once required a small adjustment now demands a major sacrifice. Moving early costs comfort. Moving late costs safety. The longer you wait, the more expensive motion becomes until movement itself feels impossible. There's also a deeper fear beneath waiting. Responsibility for outcome. If you act and fail, the failure is yours. If you wait and fail, the blame feels shared. That illusion of shared responsibility keeps people frozen long after they should move. Collapse feeds on that hesitation. Survivors learn a different definition of responsibility. They understand that responsibility means stewardship of self, not loyalty to systems that no longer function. It means recognizing when obedience becomes self-harm. It means choosing movement not because it's sanctioned, but because it's necessary. Waiting feels responsible because it delays consequence. But delay is not neutrality. It's a decision with momentum. And once momentum builds, it doesn't care about your intentions. Those who survive aren't reckless. They're precise. They act when action still has leverage. They don't wait for permission to protect their future. They move because they can still choose to. And that choice, made early, quietly, and without applause, is often the only one that keeps them alive. The most effective exits never announce themselves. They don't look heroic or desperate. They don't come with raised voices or slammed doors. They look like reduction. Fewer objects, fewer conversations, fewer reasons to stay. From the outside, it appears as disengagement. From the inside, it feels like alignment. The moment when movement stops being reaction and becomes intention. People imagine escape as urgency, as running. In reality, the most successful departures are slow and deliberate. They begin long before anything visibly collapses. They start with subtle shifts in behavior, disengaging from unnecessary routines, simplifying needs, lowering dependence on fragile systems. By the time others notice something is wrong, the person who leaves early has already lightened their footprint. This is where many misunderstand what leaving actually means. It's not rejection of others. It's recognition of limits. You don't walk away because you lack compassion. You walk away because staying would require you to sacrifice awareness, autonomy, or mobility. Collapse doesn't punish kindness. It punishes overcommitment. Quiet exits protect choice. When you move early, you still have options. You can observe, adapt, pivot. When you wait too long, options narrow until movement itself becomes dangerous. Early movement preserves flexibility. Late movement forces desperation. There's also a psychological shift that happens when someone prepares to leave quietly. They stop performing stability for others. They stop explaining themselves. They stop managing other people's expectations. This doesn't come from coldness. It comes from clarity. You realize that energy spent maintaining appearances is energy not spent staying adaptable. Those who leave early often feel guilt, not because they did something wrong, but because they violated an unspoken contract, the agreement to endure together. But collapse changes the terms of that contract. When systems fail, collective endurance becomes selective. Some people can move, some can't. And pretending otherwise only increases harm. The quiet exit preserves dignity. It avoids drama. It avoids drawing attention. It doesn't create ripples that attract pressure. It's not about hiding. It's about not becoming a signal. In unstable environments, signals invite interference. Silence preserves autonomy. When systems finally fracture, those who left early aren't celebrated or condemned. They're simply absent. Their absence speaks louder than any explanation. They didn't win. They didn't abandon. They just understood timing. This is the truth few accept. Survival isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't seek recognition. It's a series of small, nearly invisible choices made before necessity turns into panic. The people who endure are not the bravest or the strongest. They're the ones who recognize the moment when staying stopped being safe and stepped away while the door was still open.